and welcome to another edition of TED Excellence, the show in which myth-making is the primary tool I use to bolster my self-esteem. And I come to you live from my Corona bunker on the moon with Dogcat Fox, a Pepperjack, and all of you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Thursday. Terrific Thursday. Why is it terrific? We're going to learn something today. I hope. Got my fingers crossed. Maybe. We shall see. Hope you're all doing well on this wonderful day. It's been a busy week for me, work-wise and otherwise, and it'll continue to be a busy next few days as Satsu and I approach the end of an era. The last broadcast of Lords of the Night will occur this coming Tuesday. My last hosting job for the show will come this coming Monday. And what else do I want to say? Oh, yeah. Next Thursday, TEDx will try its new time slot at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. I will repeat that again at the end of the broadcast, just in case anybody misses that. So, what are we talking about today? Well, apparently there are 3 myths about racism that keep the U.S. from progress. And this is an actual TED Talk, as you can see on the screen. An official TED Talk. Fancy dancy. And one of the reasons that well, there's 2 reasons why I picked this one out today. One is the title. Got my curiosity going. And secondly, TED turned off all comments from being put onto the video on YouTube, which always makes me curious. So not knowing what's inside of this particular talk that might have led to some kind of controversy, although I suppose I could suspect something, we're going to find out ourselves today and make comments of our own. So how's about that? And who will be joining me on this commenting adventure into myths and mythology? That would be Kiever Dam, hello. Sean Hooley, hello. Patrice Ripley, hello. Jaeger Pony, hello. Check Your Logic, hello. Funtime Bats, hello. Gunfox61, hello. Zeke Weiss, hello. The Original Shroom, hello. Cynic, hello. Raziel, hello. Swirl Blue, hello. And then chat jump, because of course it does. Bridget, hello. Dark Resurrect, hello. Jamie Milquist, hello. Yoshi the Macabre, hello. Cannibalistic Wizard, hello. Evil One, hello. And Jaded Clay, hello. Spud Gun, hello. Lexi Mads, hello. Dagger 3K, hello. Bruno Montiero, hello. Roger Reynolds, hello. Megan Ring, hello. Zero the Hero 909, hello. Angela Arriaga, hello. Brad Young, hello. Red V7, hello. Robert Pincus, hello. This is Kyle, hello. Tyrell Deos, hello. Non-Vitae Rex, hello. I think I got everyone in that pass. And I only kind of stumbled once or twice. Good for me. I'm so happy for me. All right, well. Get your bingo cards ready, everyone. Bingo card links are in the description. Today's bingo card is A. A as in Aries for mythological figures. If you'd like to participate in voting for the bingo card, be sure to follow me on Twitter, as I will, when I remember to, post a poll each week to choose the next bingo card to use in the upcoming broadcast. So, with all of that being said, let's get into it. And Lurking Gopher, hello. A few seconds for a sound test, and then we will begin. This one clocks in at just over 10 minutes. So you guys tell me if you can hear this, and then we will go. Well, tell me, did you hear the applause just then? That's enough. We don't want to ruin everything here. So did you hear the applause? Well, let me know, and then I will move on. Dark Resurrect says, don't forget to hit like and share, folks. Yes, everyone, please, if you would. If you like this kind of stuff, let me and YouTube know by hitting that little thumbs up. And also, if you share the link to my content, whether it's this or anything else, and you do so on Twitter specifically, please be sure to tag me in your tweet so I know that you've done so I can thank you personally, because I really do appreciate it. Let's see. Jamie Milquist says, yes. Jaeger Pony says, heard you. Well, it's not me I'm worried about. It's the applause. Original Stream said, yep, heard it. And Hell Triangle says, yes, heard the applause. There you go. Very well. Let's go.
When I'm out at the grocery store or maybe a restaurant or the park with my son, he's 6.
Oh, well, we have childhood or family anecdote right off the bat. I'll back up a second here, but real quick. Free space on the board. And then childhood or family anecdote. And I know that by the title, we might already automatically circle a list, but I'm going to wait until it's actually stated in the episode.
He's 6 and a half. People will stop us and mention that they think that he's handsome. I agree.
Yes.
They'll use that opportunity to chop it up with him. And often when they're done talking with him, they'll mention that they think he's a smart and engaging little guy. When those people walk away, the thought that comes to my mind is that I hope they remember meeting him as a child when they see him again as a grown man. This thought comes to my mind because I've written 2 books about race and racism in the United States, and this kind of work can produce feelings of pessimism.
Yes, when you surround yourself in thoughts and notions about the worst parts of human behavior, I'm sure it can make you very pessimistic. I know something about that, having read the news practically every night for the last 4 years. So, yeah, I get you.
One of the things that I've learned is that Americans have an orientation toward progress.
Are those your 2 books? I can't read the names on them, but for those of you listening at home, there is a card up on the screen that has the covers for 2 different books. The first one is Stay Woke, A People's Guide to Making All Black Lives Matter. And the second one is Racial Stasis, with a subheading that says The Millennial Generation and the Stagnation of Racial Attitudes. I think that's what it says. That the text is very, very small. Stagnation of Racial Attitudes in American Politics. I am assuming that these are her 2 books, unless she says otherwise.
In this context, what that means is that we often celebrate the distance between where we were and where we are now.
Yeah.
But that same orientation can blind us from the gap between where we are and where we could or should be.
Not necessarily. If we cannot celebrate our successes, but understand that nothing's still perfect, what are we supposed to do with our successes? Are we supposed to ignore the advancements in and of themselves? I mean, sure, complacency can be the risk, but I don't think it's necessarily inherent.
The other thing that I've learned about Americans is that we have a very, very narrow understanding of racism.
Okay.
Mostly in the minds and hearts of people.
Okay, well, just for a level set of where my baseline is, racism, in simple terms, is the elevation and or denigration of a person or persons on the basis of their race. No one is exempt from being able to do such a thing. But that's sort of my simple definition. So I'll be curious to see what she has to say about it. Thank you, Dark Resurrect. Heading to work now. If you are done before I get there, thanks for the entertainment on the way, and have a good day after the show, Scribbles. Thank you, Dark Resurrect. Appreciate it so much. I might be seeing Sister Scribe after this, so maybe so. All right, so definition of racism is too narrow in America. How much broader must it be?
Usually old people. Old people from the South.
Are we making stereotypical assumptions then? Okay.
And this really narrow definition can constrain our opportunities to produce a more racially egalitarian society.
Racially egalitarian society. Okay. Well, you have to start off and tell us what is the narrow and, I'm assuming, incorrect definition, and then what is the correct definition?
We like to hunt for racists and distance ourselves from people who say mean things about whole groups of people, or who idealize the 1950s.
It's not groups, it's demographics, but que sera.
But the fact of the matter is that we might just need to look in the mirror. Now, I'm not saying that everyone here is a racist.
But
what I am saying is that everyone here has the capacity and perhaps even the propensity to live their life in a way, to make decisions, to rely on biases that reproduce racial inequality.
Yes, well, everyone has the capacity to become a serial killer or a saint. So you're just going to suspect everyone in the room of, even if you might not be, since you possess the potential, I'm going to treat you like you are. Is that how that works? Because that's how you made it sound like it works.
So people say, well, you do all this work about racism. What's the answer?
Yeah. I mean, you've done a lot of work. You've done a lot of research. Please do tell me, what is the answer to racism?
And I say that the first thing we might need to do is to come to a shared understanding about what racism is in the first place.
Okay, yeah, again, I am waiting. What is the incorrect definition, the narrow definition, and what is the correct definition?
History shows that racists have had the upper hand in deciding who the racists are and what racism is, and it's never them or the things that they do. But maybe if we come together and come to a shared and perhaps a precise definition of what racism is, we can work toward creating a society where mothers like me aren't in constant fear of their children's lives.
Okay, and I have to ask, are you talking about a precise definition or your definition?
I'd like to dispel 3 myths about racism.
Okay, we have a list. Officially, we have a list onto the card, and I'll review the card real quick here as well. So circling a list. Collectivizes own demographic. Mothers like me. Circling that one. Systemic institutional. I don't think she's used either term yet, but I'd be surprised if we don't get there at some point. Sales pitch for product or service. She put her book titles and covers up on the screen. That is a sales pitch and an advertisement. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. She hasn't used the terms yet. Plays victim. Maybe vicariously through her son and that anecdote, but I'm going to wait on it. Microaggressions, unconscious bias. She talked about the biases and so on, so I'll circle that one. Privilege, she hasn't said it yet. Contradicts own point or argument. Not sure what her argument is yet. Patriarchy, no. Weightless example, we haven't had any yet. Wage gap. No. Feminism, no. Marginalization. I don't think she's said either one yet. We'll wait and see. White supremacy, certainly implied, but I bet we'll get there. Word salad, not yet. Self-vilification or wretchedness, I'd be surprised. Make something about race, sex, etc. for no reason, not yet. Attempt to coin new buzzword, buzz phrase, not yet. Mind reading assumes motives. Well, her little comment to the crowd there, probably by the end of this, but I'll sit on it for the moment. Benevolent condescension, I'd be surprised if we don't get there. Anecdote that probably never happened. I can believe that people met her kid in the park and thought that he was handsome and a good boy. So yeah, I believe that one. Leaves out vital context. We need to have something more substantive, I rate there, before we can ask about context. So far I have circled collectivizes own demographic, sales pitch for product or service, childhood or family anecdote, microaggressions, unconscious bias, free space, and a list. Those are what I've got circled. Let's continue.
On our trek toward mutual understanding.
Okay, let me back up a little bit to get out of that cutoff statement.
About racism on our trek toward mutual understanding.
Our trek toward mutual understanding. Okay.
First, it's true that the South has done its work to earn its reputation as the most racist region, but there are other states and regions that are competing for the title.
Okay, for those of you listening at home, the first card on the screen says, myth number 1, the South is the most racist place in the United States. Okay. I don't know if I ever thought that to be absolutely true. I know historically, the South has always been, I guess, characterized as such. So maybe I thought that to be true. Okay. I'd be curious to know how you measure racism region to region, but okay.
For example, if we look at the most segregated states in terms of where Black kids go to school, we'll see, sure, some are in the South, there's some out West, in the Midwest, and in the Northeast. Yes,
there are many schools today that are actively practicing racial segregation, and most of them are branding it as a good thing. Racial affinity groups for the betterment of students' self-identity and so on. So I don't know if that counts. I don't see, I don't see Minnesota as one of the states. And yet I did a video where a public school there was actively segregating its staff and or students. Interesting.
They're where we live. Or if we look at states with the biggest racial disparities in terms of prison populations, we see that none of them are in the South.
Oh, okay. So everyone who is in jail who, I don't know, you consider to be a victim of racism inherently is there not because they committed a crime, but because of racism. Speaking of law enforcement, hear the song of their people in the background. It's been a very busy day around my apartment the last couple hours. Lots of sirens. I'm not quite sure what's going on. Hopefully it's far away from me. And there they go. Real quick. Thank you, tall person. Hoy all can't watch live. We'll watch in full later. Happy International Orangutan Day. Ooh, orangutans. Yes, I hear you. You're going somewhere else now, yes? Okay, thank you. Orangutans. I always liked the orangutans at the zoo. I always thought they looked very cuddly and friendly. You know, I think that's kind of one of their tricks of deception. Be careful of them orangutans. Okay, so racially disparate prison populations equal inherent racism in the state. All right.
They're where we live. My colleague, Rebecca Kreitzer, and I looked at a standard battery of racial attitudes of prejudice. And we found that in the 1990s, states in the South dominated the most racially negative attitudes.
They have a citation at the bottom of this. Data source Smith, Kreitzer and Son, I think, 2019. I doubt she'll tell us exactly how they measured that, but I'd be curious to know.
But this geography has evolved and things have changed. By 2016, we found that the Dakotas, Nebraska, states in the Midwest and the Northeast were competing for the most prejudiced population titles.
Oh, so Texas stopped being racist by 2016? Okay, well, that's interesting. Okay, so North Carolina and Alabama, they just stopped being racist? All right.
Now, I'm not saying that one state is more racist than another.
Yes, you are. You are explicitly saying that by showing those maps. By showing the comparison of these states are resentful and these states are not, you are specifically saying that. All of these maps you've shown are saying that. So, yeah, no.
But what I am saying is that every state might have its own special brand of racism.
Every state has its own special brand of racism. Okay. Are you going to define racism first? You know, give us the narrow and incorrect definition and then give us the better and more correct definition, because I'm still not quite sure what we're talking about.
And it doesn't have to be like this. Most of the inequalities that we see in our day-to-day lives happen at the state and local level. What that means is that we don't have to go all the way to Congress to make change in our communities. We can simply hold our city, our county, our state legislators to task to produce more equitable outcomes.
More equitable outcomes. Okay, well, do tell. How would you hold a state government accountable or take them to task to lead to an equitable outcome in, I don't know, prison population or racial resentfulness? And I have to ask the question because it's come up many, many, many times. Is simply a disparity in statistics evidence of racism? If demographic A is at this number and demographic B is at this number, is the space between them explained in totality by racism? Because I'm cautious about how you're determining what accounts or what equates to racism based on the examples you've given.
Myth 2.
All right, myth number 2.
We're not that good at hunting for racists.
We're not that good at hunting for racists. Well, myth number 2 on the card says, it's quite obvious who the racists are. It all depends, right? Because short of being a mind reader, you are basically beholden to the words and or actions of individuals to make that determination. I think that's basically it, but maybe she'll have another theory.
Remember that time when the governor of Virginia did blackface and people were like, ooh, that's bad.
Yeah, I remember that time when it was how many years in the past and everything, and nobody brought it up until all of a sudden, and the guy's still in his job. Yeah, well, everybody's getting canceled for things that they did back in their youth or 20 years ago or something. So, yes, I remember. I remember when that was a big story, and then it became a non-story, and nobody really cares anymore. And Justin Trudeau is still in his job.
Like, ooh, that's bad. I need to get that racist out of here. I was giving y'all the side eye, and here's why.
You were giving y'all the side eye? Okay.
Well, people were going back to yearbooks to look for things that were obviously racist. Fewer people were looking into the current day policy stances of legislators who probably did blackface but didn't get caught.
Who probably did blackface but didn't get caught. So are you making assumptions of people without evidence then, and holding them to account in your mind for things that you think they may have done? I'm circling mind reading assumes motives. That's a pretty easy one.
So, how many of us might have supported a candidate who was willing to let neighborhoods secede from their district so that kids could go to all-white schools in the 21st century?
That's a mightily specific metric.
Or how many of us might have supported a ballot measure that systematically reduced some groups' chances of voting?
I don't know. I'm sure that if you have identified these politicians and or these ballot measures, you could actually tell us how many people did so. Right?
Or how many of us might have focused on the behavior of Black mothers rather than doctors or healthcare systems and policies when we learned about the huge racial disparities in maternal and infant mortality?
What? No, honestly, I got to back up. The what?
How many of us might have focused on the behavior of Black mothers?
How many of us might have focused on the behavior of Black mothers
rather than doctors or healthcare systems and policies when we learned about the huge racial disparities in maternal and infant mortality?
Oh, okay. So it's a blame the victim argument. Okay. I don't know. How many have? How would you know? Why? I mean, if it's a rhetorical question, fine, but the previous questions were conceivably something you could find out the answers to. Are we going to get a definition of racism at some point?
It doesn't have to be like this. We could do something different. We could scrutinize the behaviors of the rule makers.
Okay. Because no one has been scrutinizing the behavior of the rule makers. Okay, how, in what way should we do so? And then what should be the reaction depending on what we find?
We could orient ourselves toward a more just society. And on our way there, we can't mystify practical policy solutions.
Such as what? Give me a policy solution. I mean, give me a specific, an active example. How would you, having done 2 books on the subject, solve for racism in, I don't know, the prison population of, what was it, Wisconsin or something? I forget which state was colored. There's several states that were colored in, but, pick one, or your state. I don't know. Thank you, Inhuman Form, for the bread. He sent me a loaf of bread. All right. Oh, wait. I know what he's saying. No. I got it. I'm the next best thing since sliced bread, right? Right? Or is that a bundt cake? I don't know. Thank you in human form. Okay. I know I'm probably asking futilely, but are you going to give us like an example policy you'd change?
Myth 3.
Oh, we're on myth 3. Okay, reading the card real quick. Myth 3, racism will die off with the oldest generations of Americans. Well, that is certainly a myth. Racism will never die because human beings, as long as human beings exist, there will always be racism of one kind or another. That doesn't necessarily mean all humans will be racist, but like I've said before, we don't have laws on the books because we trust people to behave well. Most laws are effectively confessions that we understand now that this behavior, whatever the law is covering, was always bad, or we have evolved to the point where we recognize its badness. And so it's a promise that we will do better and hold people to account better in the future for this thing we now acknowledge as bad. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was one of the biggest confessions of wrongdoing ever put to paper in the United States. So, sure, that is a myth. Racism will not die when old people die. Certainly not.
If you believe that when all the grandmas in Mississippi die, that racism is going to go with them, you are in for a big disappointment.
I wonder how many people actually believe that. I mean, I can't possibly know the answer to that question, but would anyone of any reasonable mind actually believe that to be the case? Is that a very popular myth?
We like to think that young people are going to do the hard work of eradicating racism, but there's some things that we should know.
Like relatively young teachers are enacting racial segregation in their schools this very day and calling it a positive step. Yeah, no, I totally believe that what you've just put up there is indeed a myth.
We know that young white folks especially.
Young white folks especially. Okay, tell me what young white folks especially do and or think.
Like diversity. They appreciate it. They're looking for it.
Diversity on the board. Diversity, equity, and or inclusion on the board. Okay.
But we also know that they don't live diverse lives.
Oh, okay. Well, I know I'm probably, again, climbing up a tree that'll never bear fruit, but what defines a diverse life?
Research shows that the average white American literally has one Black friend.
So the number of non-white friends someone has in their life defines one's life as whether it is diverse or not. Okay. I mean, that's the definition I have to draw from this. All right.
And what that means is that most don't have any at all. Sociologists like Sara Mayorga show that even when well-meaning white folks move to diverse neighborhoods, they don't necessarily have positive interactions, no less any, with their neighbors who aren't white.
Well, what's the situation with a Black kid who has no friends that aren't Black, or an Asian kid who has no friends who aren't Asian? Why are you focusing on one demographic? If racism is born out of not having a diverse life, isn't that the same for any human being who just doesn't happen to be around people who don't look like them? Why make this the singular example? Why not just say people who do not have social interactions with people outside of their race are inherently, I don't know, less talented in relations or something? Why pick this one demographic?
My research with Professor Christopher DeSanti shows that when we ask white millennials their racial attitudes and policy preferences, that they're sometimes just as, and other times even more racially conservative than boomers.
And how were these questions answered by other demographics? How do they compare? Okay.
When we ask them about the things that are important to them, they don't have any particular sense of urgency around questions of racial inequality. How do we get like this? Well, one of the things we might think about is how we raise our kids and equip them to solve the problems that we want them to solve.
Okay. Well, you didn't give us much information there. So, surprise, surprise, I'm going to circle leaves out vital context. Okay, so it's up to white kids and white parents, I'm presuming, to solve the problems we want to solve because they inherently possess the problem. Also, are you going to define racism at some point in the next 2.5 minutes?
Research shows that white parents in particular will either...
White parents in particular. Okay, so this is all down to skin color defining attitudes, behaviors, thought processes, and I guess responsibility. That's what you're telling me.
Parents in particular will either choose to not talk about issues of racism to their kids in order to protect them from a harsh racial reality, or they instill colorblind lessons.
Instill colorblind lessons. Okay, so parents who make the attempt to teach their kid the value or the quasi-value of not making race a relevant factor in assessing people, that is a problem. And just for clarification, for anybody who might be new to this whole thing, there are two definitions of colorblindness. There's one that deals with being a principle, and then there's one where people make it some kind of accusation of ignoring reality. As in, if you see a person who is black and you say you are colorblind, you're lying because obviously they are black. Because they take the whole concept of colorblindness in this context as a literal thing, rather than saying that person's skin color is as relevant to my assessment of them as a person as their eye color or their hair color, as in it isn't. That is the principle, that is the value contained within the concept of colorblindness. So when I hear someone tell me that colorblindness is a bad thing, my first thought is, so you want me to value skin color when it comes to judging a person? That's all I hear. But I'm not quite sure where we're going, so.
And that can actually reinforce negative racial attitudes. So it's kind of like how some of your parents might have given you books about puberty so that they didn't have to talk about the birds and the bees, and then you tried to connect all the dots and then you did it all wrong.
Actually, my dad talked to me about it directly. I can't speak for all parents, but yeah, if I had any questions, he was right there. And I guess maybe I just lucked out with my parents. Well, I think so.
It's like that. It doesn't have to be like this. We can do better.
Such as?
We can have hard conversations with our kids so that they don't grow up like many of us did, thinking that talking about racism makes you a racist.
Okay, well, I know we're not going to hear it, but what would be the ideal conversation for a white parent to have with a white child in regards to racism? In our speaker's mind, I'd be curious to know what she qualifies as a hard conversation and what points to hit in such a thing between a white parent and a white child.
It doesn't. And so that we can prevent them from making the same mistakes that we've seen in the past.
By dwelling on race rather than making it an irrelevancy. That's what I'm hearing.
Remember a long, long time ago in 2008 when we were all pining to live in a post-racial world?
I'm still pining for that, honestly. It's one of those things about trying to form a more perfect union, holding out hope in the face of absolute pessimism. Yeah, I'm still there, unfortunately.
Well, I say that it's time for us to think bigger and dream bigger and think about what it would be like to live in a post-racist world.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's going to be a lot longer of a trek to get there if you continue dwelling on race and you decide off the bat that white people are inherently the problem.
But in order to do that, we'd have to come together to have a shared definition of racism.
Yes. Okay. Are we going to get there in the last minute?
Not just in the matter of hearts and minds, but in systems, policies, rules, decisions made over and over again to marginalize some people.
Marginalize, up on the board. Bingo card, marginalized, marginalization. Got it? All right.
And agree to become anti-racist.
Anti-racism. Yes. Well, here's the thing. If you want to get to a post-racist world and you believe in anti-racism, you'll never get there because there are only two conditions under anti-racism. You're either racist or anti-racist. There's no such thing as not racist. Whereas racism, being a racist, is just being in denial of your racism and in the existence of it. And anti-racism is confession. Under anti-racist ideology, racism is the universal constant and is the original sin that shall never go away. And I am not being hyperbolic for anybody who thinks that I am. I have heard this from the very person who wrote the book on the subject, Ibram X. Kendi. That was his definition of what anti-racism means. So if she's talking about a post-racist society while operating under the beliefs of anti-racism, there is no end, ever.
People who learn more and do better. So we could ask harder questions of candidates about their stances on racial inequality before we throw our full weight behind them. We could boycott or boycott businesses whose practices don't align with our values.
Well, you haven't even described what our values should be because you haven't even defined your version of racism yet, or what the version should be. So it's, thank you, John Miller, but anti-racists are more racist than open racists. That seems to be the pattern because you're assuming the worst of people off the cuff based on what they look like, which is not how you get past racist ideologies.
We could talk to our kids about racism. We could figure out our state's special brand of racism and work to eradicate it.
It would have been nice if you'd given us at least one active example of what you're talking about. What is Minnesota's special brand of racism? What is California's special brand of racism? This has been your vocation for some time now. You should be able to tell us at least one example in 10 minutes, but you haven't. And neither have you defined racism, either the incorrect one, the narrow version, or the broader, more correct one. So I still ultimately don't have much of an idea of what you're talking about.
People made racial disparities, and people can unmake them. Sure, it'll be hard, but the fact of the matter is that someone is depending on us to do nothing at all. Thank you.
I cut it off there because it went into a big musical number. Well, not like on the stage or something, but just a song that I'm pretty sure there's copyright around. Anyway, okay. And I only know that because I trim the ends of these things so that they're short and I take all the music stuff out. Yeah, that didn't tell me anything. It made a lot of claims and made a lot of abstract calls to action, but with little to no specificity. And if she wanted to talk about racism, she should have been talking about people in general. How do people operate when it comes to racial tolerances or questions of racial equity and so on and so forth? but she honed in on one specific racial demographic, which is effectively an accusation that only one demographic has any involvement with or control over racial outcomes, which in and of itself perpetuates a racial stereotype and sets up a villain-victim dynamic right there. As though racism as a notion cannot exist in the hearts of everyone, conceivably, of any race, at any time. No definition, no specificity. Okay, well, those are the three myths: that the South is the most racist, that racism will die off with the death of the eldest generation, and that was the third one. What was the second one? Right. It's quite obvious who the racists are. Myth number 2. Well, now that was a lucky click on my part. I landed right on the card to remind me. Okay, well, there you go, everyone. That's the presentation as presented. Let's go to the bingo card and see what we see here. I will go over the card one more time to see if there's any squares that I can obviously circle. And then I will take any arguments for squares to be circled from you. So going along the list here, systemic institutional. Yes, she said systemic. She talked about systemic racism. She did. Which, yeah, you know what that means.
What? What is that? What the fuck is that?
I hit the wrong button. This is not a WTF. That was accidental. No, that was an incorrect button push on my part. I apologize. No. It's this.
Bingo. What? Of course!
Yeah, no, to clarify, this was not so mind-numbing and out of sorts as to be a WTF. That was me clicking the wrong thing. I really need to, like, is there a way to categorize these things? Like, I got to find a better way to do that. I don't want to do that again. But anyway, we have our first bingo. Mistake aside. Moving on. Plays victim. Directly. I don't know. I mean, she talked about demographically and so on, but yeah, I'm not quite sure about that one. Privilege. She never said the word. And truth be told, I'm trying to think if she brought up anything that could be counted as such. I don't think so. At least not in the aggregate. Contradicts own point or argument. I don't know what the argument is. The argument is racism's bad and we need to do more to end racism. Which I'd be hard-pressed to think of a rational person in the world who wouldn't agree fundamentally with that notion. Did she contradict herself? Okay, and just to clarify, not providing more details does not mean she contradicted herself. That's without vital context. So, I mean, I suppose I could say by honing in on one racial demographic and making that demographic out to be the end-all be-all for the cause and the cure, it could be considered racism and thus contradicts her own point. You guys let me know on that one. Patriarchy, she never talked about gender. Weightless example. I mean, most of the things she put on the board without any more information effectively became weightless examples, because how do you measure and it's actually, no, I take it back. Contradicts own point or argument, where she said, now I'm not saying that one state is more racist than the other. Right. Yeah, no, she completely, yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, she contradicted herself there. Okay, so I fixed myself. I corrected myself. Weightless example. I don't know. Those maps in the context of her talk without her defining what made up. Her not defining racism and then showing examples of where she says racism is greater or lesser in different places makes all those examples weightless, because I don't know what she's talking about. I have no specificity in order to compare, contrast, or even just try to think about the accuracy of what she's saying. Wage gap, as far as I can recall, she never brought up economic stuff, at least not in a specific way. Feminism, no. White supremacy, I mean, by implication, there was enough in the aggregate over the course of that I'd say, yeah, even if she didn't use the term, it was definitely underpinning everything. Word salad, no, I understood everything she was saying. A lot of it lacked more details, but I understood it. Self-vilification or wretchedness, no. Make something about race, sex, etc. for no reason, no. Attempt to coin new buzzword or buzz phrase, nope, she didn't repeat any one particular thing. Benevolent condescension, I felt like she was talking down to people in the audience about, just generally racism, and also sort of the sidewise accusation that everybody was flawed and so on, or just dense about certain things. Anecdote that probably never happened. The only anecdote she gave was the one about her son in the park, and I don't have any reason to think that was false. So, yeah. Let me make sure the card's all up to date. That is the card as I have it right now, everyone. If you have squares that you think should be circled, please put your arguments into the chat now, and be sure to tag me in your comment so that I can make it out amongst everything else. Let's see. Spud Gun, her whole talk was fucking weightless. I mean, yes, ultimately, without more definitions or something more call to action and specificity, there wasn't a whole lot there than, yeah, just sort of broad statistics and accusations. I mean, again, if and this isn't just this speaker, it's so many other TED and TEDx speakers. If you're going to come to one of these presentations and you're going to make these grand declarations about the reality of the world, have at least one active example of what you're talking about. I know that your time on the stage is limited. You've only got 10 to 15 minutes or so. But if you bring up some, grand point, or observation about reality, you need to provide at least one active example to back up your case. At least one. So when she brings up what policies could be changed, we need to change policies to ensure more equitable outcomes. Okay, what is a policy, a specific policy that you could name that either accomplishes this or is working against it, right? Because if you can say which one should be undone or which one should be enacted, that'd at least be something to sort of dig my teeth into. If you're going to say, how many of us have backed a politician who did this, that, and the other? Name one politician, and contrast what they said on the campaign trail with what they ultimately did once in office. Something. I mean, I can believe that those things happen, but it's really hard to sort of, take you seriously if you can't at least give us one example to back it up. Because I take these things in their own universe. Like, the talk is what the talk is. I'm very hesitant to try to fill in the blanks on behalf of the speaker unless I absolutely have to. Spud Gun, she plays victim by saying white people need to fix it for black people. Now, it has to be something more personal than that. She was very abstract. I'm not quite there where she was herself being a victim. Yeah, I know I'm being really sticky on this one, but as we're getting down to such few squares before bingos, I want to make sure that I'm being fair with it. Roger Reynolds, the school system must be too busy teaching CRT to teach how to properly give a presentation. No, I don't have any doubt that, if I talked to her directly, I bet if I asked her, give me an example of a policy that needs to be reversed or a policy that needs to be instituted to provide a more equitable outcome in whatever, schooling or business or whatever. I'm dollars to donut, she could probably tell me. But again, we're talking about this presentation and this thing. And so I can only work within the boundaries of what I'm given here. So it's not a matter of me thinking that she's like dumb or something. I don't think that at all. But the quality of the presentation and the argumentation is what I'm looking at here. Wikipedia snippet. Wait, are you trying for a coverall? A coverall? I don't know what that means. So, let's see. Lexi Mads. I learned my county in Florida was the last to integrate after the Civil Rights Act was signed. I haven't seen any racism in my town, though. I don't think anyone living here today would know that. I couldn't tell you. I mean, if that is literally the case, great. Your county's awesome. So sure. You know, I mean, and this is the thing. It's like, now the one part of her presentation that I totally agree with is that, you know, taking the amount of progress that has been made and saying we're done, that's complacency. And complacency can lead to the resurgence of old bad ideas. And it's weird because we are seeing the resurgence of old bad ideas, except they're being packaged now as good ideas, which is so bizarre to me that I don't know what to tell you. No, there's still a lot of things that we should and could be doing, right? But here's the thing. In my lifetime, right, I was just watching, I've talked about this before. I was just watching Homicide: Life on the Street, a TV series from the 90s. My sister got me the whole thing for my birthday, and I'm on the 7th season. And now they've addressed this in previous episodes, but in the 7th season, they got very specific about focusing in on homophobia. And the words that were used on live or on broadcast television back then, the concepts and the societal attitudes that were reflected in the scripts and the storylines back then would be absolutely alien to anybody who has been growing up in the last 15 years or so. If they saw that on TV like I did when I was 15 or 16, they would be like, their jaws would drop, because our society has changed. Is it perfect? No. But here's the thing. The amount of advancement, the amount of evolution that we've all had as a country, both legally and societally in the last, well, just my lifetime, the last 20 years or so, gives me hope and shows me proof that we are able to and can improve. Will it always be fun or clean or an easy way to get there? No. But we can look back and see the hope that we can have for the future by the change we've already introduced in ourselves. That's the part where I don't necessarily think, I mean, as I say, complacency is dangerous, but at least celebrating the fact that we have changed is not a bad thing. It's proof that we can eventually do better than we are. And there seems to be some kind of pushback against that notion, which is kind of, disappointing in my mind. Jaded Clay, yeah, but now we are stuck with a bunch of pussies who melt at the slightest offense. The same thing, and I know this is going to sound sort of, I don't know, going backwards or something. The same thing was said about the hippies, right? Peace, love, and understanding. And look what most of the hippies turned into after they grew up. And, not to say that, what the hippies turned into stereotypically is perfect or something. But again, people change. Life has a way of refining you as you go along, for better or worse. But I don't necessarily lose all hope at what I'm seeing of the most worrying of our population, at least in the on the Twitter sphere or otherwise. I don't think necessarily that the people that we see representing the worst possible outcomes of this generation represent the total of the generation. At least that's my hope. I guess we'll see. Let's see. Any other arguments for squares to be circled, guys? I think we might have hit a wall there, but I'll give it another second or three here because I like to make it at least an even hour of a broadcast. Renovatio. EU officially and legislatively removed the ability for men to be discriminated against where that discrimination favors women. They renamed it positive action. Just rebadge and celebrate the old hate. Yeah, and that's also something that's taking place a lot right now. Just like I talked about with racial affinity groups in schools and, grown adult teachers trying to tell me that splitting up kids on the basis of race is a good thing and a positive action for kids and their self-esteem and everything. I can only hope that kind of thinking specifically, because that's the most blatant one that I've come across thus far, is tramped down and right quick. Because and that story down in Atlanta where that parent called out that teacher for allegedly, at this point, because the school district is keeping their lips zipped, doing that very thing. I hope that is the first of many, because even if that allegation turns out to be either false or partly false, I have video evidence of many teachers in different schools doing that very thing without any kind of ambiguity. So, and let's see, Jared Clace, fears for her children, plays victim. I see, here's the thing, and again, maybe it's just the advantage of using your child, but I can't begrudge any parent fearing for their child's well-being in this day and age. And given the media hype over certain things, I wouldn't blame some parents, whatever their race, of fearing for their children. Does that make her a victim or just make her a parent? I'm not convinced on that one. Not convinced. Let's see. Wikipedia snippet. Didn't they have a big fight to stop segregation a few decades ago? Now you want it back? I don't want it back. No reasonable person who knows a little bit about history wants it back. And yet, again and again, example after example, it's being instituted. It's not a theory. It's not a conspiracy about it or something, or some kind of... That is not a myth. Schools enacting racial affinity groups and racial segregation for great justice. It's happening right now. So let's see. And Roger Reynolds, wasn't that thing in Atlanta a principal, not a teacher? Or was that somewhere else? Oh, was it a principal? Did I say teacher? I thought, okay, you're right. It probably was the principal because, yeah, it was a principal who did that, right? Because it was a assistant principal who confirmed it. Okay, so if I said teacher, I apologize. That was not my thing. So I should say teachers and or staff of schools are doing this. So anyway, everyone, I'm going to call it here. We're at the top of the hour, and that makes an even show, I think. Didn't learn much. Wasn't anything in there that was either new to me or all that surprising, I suppose. But just like with so many other TEDx talks, and this being an actual TED talk, there wasn't much to, hang on to as far as like specificity of examples or definitions. And especially when she opens the presentation by talking about how the definition we currently have is so narrow and we really should broaden it, and then never deliver. So anyway, everyone, thank you so much for joining me. If you'd like to hear more from me or Satsu 2 Cents, you can find both of us tonight, Thursday night, on this channel at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for The Lords of the Night, where... as a special episode, we'll probably just do a full-on call-in show, posting the link to the StreamYard into the chat. And if you are so inclined, and we at least recognize you and aren't a complete stranger, you can come on the show for a few minutes and talk to us and speak your mind, and we'll get as many people on tonight as we can. So that's tonight on this channel at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. And as well, TEDx next week will be moving to that very time slot, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, next Thursday for TED Excellence, a new era of examinations of TED Talks and TEDx Talks. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things, even though everyone here is so well behaved. You have very little to do. Everyone who donated, thank you. Thank you so much for your generosity. I really do appreciate it. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you are all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.